How's it going? I hope you're all doing well. Here at nvRanger & Co., we have recently been tasked with a job to gain a better understanding as to how the caravans work across the Mojave wasteland. I'm sure many of you have done business with them before, but do you know where they come from, where they go to, and who they're actually associated with? If you're following along the game's intended path, you'll leave Nipton, go through this roadway that runs through this canyon of some sorts, and then finally reach this desert overpass, this bit of road that sort of awkwardly curves up and down into another road. And right at that point, two caravans will spawn and begin walking forward. I've seen these guys here a million times, but when I think about it a little bit too much, it's strange. Their existence is very strange. First of all, where are they coming from? If they're coming from the road we just came from, that makes no sense because they would have been attacked by the Viper ambush, not to mention there are mines under various cones along that roadway. And then the only other direction or road they could be coming from is down near Searchlight, which also wouldn't make sense because Searchlight is completely irradiated and full of ghouls. Why would they be down there? They're also walking from the opposite direction of Searchlight, so that doesn't make sense as is. But anyway, they're coming down off of this desert overpass, and then they immediately turn left onto this road. Now in real life, this road doesn't exist. We do have Highway 95, but that goes north out of Searchlight. There is no road that exists here. In real life, the road we take out of Nipton in this direction is Nipton Road, and that's in California. Once you cross into Nevada, it turns into Joshua Tree Highway. Now this road goes all the way down to the town of Searchlight, which exists in real life, and that's where it meets Highway 95. But in between, in game at least, there's this other road that this caravan is taking, and I can't find anything like it in real life. I also found myself wondering, where does this caravan actually go? Who are they associated with? Is this a Crimson caravan if you will? They go down this road, immediately get attacked by Legion, and then they proceed on to Novak. I knew that much, but I often lose them when crossing this road in game because I don't walk alongside of them. It's sort of monotonous, it takes a long time, but I took the liberty of doing that for the sake of this video. I walked alongside this caravan for their entire route. They get to Novak, but then after that things get a little bit strange. After leaving Novak, my assumption, my best guess, even though I've played this game so many times you think I would know at this point, would be that they would go to the 188 trading post and then proceed on further into Vegas, maybe stop at the Grub and Gulp, and then go to the Crimson Caravan. But that's not at all what they did. Whenever they left Novak, they took a hard, sharp turn left before we even passed the Gibson scrapyard and started going off into the wilderness. Despite these traveling merchants being quite buggy, and we'll get into some of that later, this pathing seemed deliberate, especially when they passed under this large power pylon directly between its legs. While it seemed deliberate that they were walking in this back area, it was very clear that this part of the map was not really meant to be walked on by NPCs especially. At their spawn point at the desert overpass, the caravans are walking nearly in a parallel fashion. They're right next to each other, but by the time we're back here behind Helios 1, they're pretty separated because they keep running into things, getting stuck. It's a very awkward portion of the map. I'll admit it, I've walked in a lot of strange areas of this map that you normally don't need to go to, just wandering around looking at things, and I have been here behind Helios 1, but I'm curious how many of you have been back here. I would be surprised if the majority of players have even looked at this part of the map. There's really not a lot going on back here. You have the Black Rock Cave, which I believe has a unique weapon. And then you also have the Scorpion Gulch, which has a series of paths that leads through the wilderness that the Brotherhood of Steel likely used to escape Helios 1 and get to Hidden Valley after the NCR kicked them out. This area seems to be so forgotten, and the developers didn't even expect a whole lot of foot traffic back here because you have these really awkward dips and crevices in the map that don't look anything approximating natural, and one of the caravans got stuck in them. So this became the two parallel caravans walking side by side. They got split apart and were walking further apart, and then one got stuck completely and I couldn't follow them anymore. I was trying to push into them, wiggle them out, but it didn't work. The caravan that remained somewhat functioning proceeded past the El Dorado substation in the same direction, again still heading towards the strip. The Brahmin continued to get stuck on awkward spots like trees. The merchant got stuck just walking straight into rocks. I'm sure they would have eventually adjusted, made their way around, but I sort of nudged them and helped them proceed along whatever their set path was. Once we could get the caravan unwedged, we would continue to proceed a bit more west and push further up into the mountains until we were north of Black Mountain. You can see how close to it we were getting up here. And then eventually we would come out of the mountains, out of the wilderness, onto a road next to the RepCon headquarters. And these guys are pretty resilient. I do want to note that I looked back and eventually saw that caravan that got stuck was proceeding behind us, but I was getting a bit too split because at this point they were very far apart. So I decided to just focus on the one that was in the lead and the one that I had stuck with this far. This caravan lost their mercenary pretty early on in that Legion attack, so I decided to fill in as their mercenary. I felt like the other one had a bit of support, they were a bit safer, so I stuck with these guys. We don't make a stop at the RepCon headquarters or anything. We actually get closer to this set of maintenance or storage buildings that are behind this metal fence. Then the merchant starts heading towards the railroad, and I think, oh, are we about to hop on the railroad? But no, she refuses to follow along any sort of path, proceeds down the hill and then on to Highway 95. Remaining true to herself, she doesn't stay on Highway 95 for long. She cuts diagonally across it and gets onto the dirt parallel to Highway 95, and then we stop at the Grub and Gulp rest stop, and this appears to be some form of stop. Now, the caravans don't stop for long, but she did stop moving. Take a shot of apple juice every time I say stop. Now, she eventually gets on the program and starts walking along the road until we get under the Highway 95 overpass, where we'll continue on to this group of NCR soldiers that are standing around a barrel of fire. Get ready for another shot of apple juice because this is another stop. I was pretty surprised at this at first. I didn't think she would stop around the NCR troops, but I guess the idea here is that the NCR troops could use this traveling merchant to get some food, maybe sneak a bottle of whiskey, something like that. After the NCR troops, we're going to continue on the road until the Highway 95 overpass bends left towards the strip, and the merchant actually follows this as well. She doesn't stay on the road, cuts off into the dirt again, kind of following that overpass through the East Vegas homes. And then just when I was thinking it was starting to make sense, the traveling merchant is heading towards the Crimson Caravan, a trading hub of sorts. I'm thinking, okay, the traveling merchants aren't associated with the Crimson Caravan. This much seems to be true, but perhaps they still do some sort of business with them. She continues on, walks directly past the Crimson Caravan, right to a sort of V in the road, a joint of some sorts near North Vegas, spins around, and walks right back in the direction that we came. She doesn't stop at the Crimson Caravan at all. This is not a stop point. And this is where things started to break down a bit. So once she turns around, she starts to roughly follow a comparable path to the one she used to get to this place next to the Crimson Caravan. She's meandering off into the sides of the roads. It points up into the hills a bit and then back down into the roads. But she doesn't go back all the way to that overpass road where these two caravans started. She goes back to the El Dorado gas station next to the El Dorado dry lake. There is a prospector here. Perhaps she's intended to do business with them, or that's what the game is trying to give off, and then she turns around. But for a couple times in a row for me, she just got stuck. She was just standing next to a rock and not moving at all. After reloading a save and redoing this return walk almost entirely to the gas station, she eventually did proceed on, where she would follow right back next to that same point next to the Crimson Caravan and then turn around and begin another loop. what I think I'm gathering from following this one caravan, and then this will be backed up by the other caravans we're going to talk about after following them, is that this system is really half-baked. I'm sure many of you are aware of New Vegas's short development cycle. It's full of bugs and issues and incomplete and cut content. This is one of those things. I almost guarantee it. There are aspects of this system that seem incredibly strange and broken at points. So here's our mapping of what we will refer to as the desert overpass caravans, the ones we just followed. They'll follow this red streak that we've drawn. But this isn't necessarily concrete. I don't think the merchants have to follow just one path. In fact, I don't think the game intended for you to follow alongside of them. I think it might make them act a little bit strange or perhaps differently. Whenever I've fast traveled around to follow a different caravan, I believe I've seen this exact pair of caravans from the desert overpass following normally down Highway 95 instead of wandering off into the wilderness in between Helios 1 and Black Mountain. I'm not sure about this exactly. I'm just theorizing here. We'd have to talk to the developers that worked on this system, but I think these guys kind of rely on resets from fast traveling. Whenever you fast travel, I think there's a certain grouping of caravans that are set to appear somewhere along or near Highway 95. But if you stay right next to them, it's all the more likely that their behavior is going to start to get a bit strange. The first caravan that's alive, at least, that you should run into in-game if you're following the beaten path is the one near the Mojave outpost. I think the intended pathing for this particular caravan is to walk up to the Mojave outpost and then back down, hang out near the destroyed set of vehicles, and then continue to do that back and forth. I don't fully understand the point of this. I don't think there are too many travelers walking over here, but it is what it is. That is the point of this caravan. However, when I encountered them and attempted to follow them, the mercenary ran off in some random direction, and then the trader and their Brahmin ran off in the other direction and proceeded down the I-15. Now, no caravans are supposed to actively be wandering on the I-15 because of the powder gangers and the death claws. We can see what happened to those that did. This particular trader, though, continued to do that until he got just before Prim, after the Nevada Highway Patrol Station, cut off to the left into the wilderness and attacked an individual ghoul. He shot one ghoul and then he returned back to his normal pathing near the Mojave outpost. The strange thing is, he went up to the Mojave outpost, went about his time there, sat around, moved from position to position. When night came, he went over to the pens, slept in one of the beds. His Brahmin didn't go into the Brahmin pen, it just hung out right outside of the gate. And then the next day, he went down the hill again and then sprinted off to go fight another ghoul. Killed one and then returned back. I don't think this is intended at all. In fact, I think if you didn't follow these merchants around, some of this behavior just wouldn't occur in game. I will say perhaps this trader used to go to Nipton before the Legion destroyed it, so now instead of going all the way to Nipton because there's no one there to trade with, he just goes down the hill hoping to catch some travelers passing by and then returns back up to the outpost where it's a bit more safe. This won't be the last caravan, but the last independent traveling merchant we're going to look at is one that is intended to spawn at Boulder City upon entering the area. The wiki notes that this individual is supposed to start near the train station in Boulder City, but for me he didn't. He started in town and cut through a couple of buildings. Then he proceeded down this small hill until he got to Highway 95 and went all the way up to Novak, where apparently he's bugged and he just stays. He never leaves Novak, and beyond that, his inventory apparently never replenishes. It's also noted that he's the only caravan that doesn't have a mercenary following him, so maybe that's why he doesn't leave Novak. He doesn't want to get killed out there. Now, I do want to note that there are other caravans that appear to spawn along our red route here, the one that starts at the overpass in the road. And the only other active route I'm aware of is not one patrolled by one of these traveling merchants that are independent. This one is actually walked by a Crimson Caravan member, but you can't do trade with a Crimson Caravan member. They walk between Camp McCarran And then they don't actually get to the Crimson Caravan. They head north from Camp McCarran, the main base of the NCR. They turn right or go eastward down the road, past the NCR sharecropper farms, go north, then head west a bit more to where they'll be over here in East Vegas. They'll cross one of these wooden bridges in the area and then just stop, turn around, and head back to Camp McCarran. So it seems that the purpose of this caravan is to show that the Crimson Caravan is helping supply the NCR's efforts at Camp McCarran, but I also found it interesting that the Crimson Caravan, despite being such a large company, only have one caravan moving throughout the game world. We also have a series of caravans that are destroyed now, but tell us a little bit about what caravan movement looked like prior to their destruction. We have this caravan on the I-15, not far from Good Springs and Gene skydiving, which appears to have been taken out by powder gangers. They also seem to have been carrying a trailer, potentially on the back of a Brahmin, which we don't see in-game in any active way at all. There is another unnamed destroyed traveling merchant, it seems, near the El Dorado dry lake bed, which appears to have been taken out by some fire-breathing ants. Then we also have 3 more marked locations for destroyed caravans that are a part of the Heartache by the Number quest related to the companion Cass. First of all, we can see the Cassidy caravans, which seems to have been destroyed while it was en route towards the Grub and Gulp rest stop. We can kind of tell this based on the direction the wagon they appeared to have been carrying is facing. It appears they were coming down this road after traveling on the I-15. This event likely occurred before the powder gangers broke out and the Deathclaws took over the quarry. We also have the Griffin Wares caravan, and based on its wagon's direction, we can see it's sort of coming from the north. Perhaps it was coming from Jacobstown and headed towards west side, although we can't tell for sure. I haven't noticed this little detail, but right next to this caravan, you can see a massive billboard for the Silver Rush. The reason this is relevant is because it's a massive clue as to who is taking out these caravans. It's the Van Graffs who are working alongside the Crimson Caravan to take out competition. And then finally we have Durable Dunn's caravan, which was destroyed over here in East Vegas, although we can't really tell direction from this one. So if we take a look at our final map here and include those black lines, we can see that caravans did operate through much of the Mojave Wasteland and what we have available to us in game, and there is an explanation as to why certain roads are shut down or there aren't caravans operating on them anymore. It's still kind of surprising that none of these traveling merchants or caravans actually go into Vegas. They don't enter Freeside, North Vegas, or West Side at all. Beyond that, no caravans stop at Good Springs or Primm, which makes sense given the state of the I-15, not to mention the state of Primm. We do know traveling merchants will touch base at Novak, but they won't actually go to the 188 trading post, which is pretty surprising. You would think that would be a major stop for them. And I'm sure in theory they're supposed to, or they would be relevant within the lore or the story of the game, but in practice what we actually see in the game's systems, they don't stop there. Instead, they stop at the Grub and Gulp rest stop, the Poseidon gas station, and among a group of NCR soldiers, but nowhere else. And I do believe there is some form of cut content going on with these traveling merchants because of how oddly they're implemented into the game world. Despite the game, of course, being very buggy and half-baked in certain areas, so much of what is done seems very intentional. It's well crafted and thought out. So when you have a system like this that seems strange and a little bit broken, I think it's fair to assume that the developers maybe had something else in mind but weren't able to bring that to fruition. Anyways, I'm gonna get this map back to my employer. Maybe we can help these caravans shape up a bit and get in order. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the comments.